Parks, who is very fine, very fit, and has gone gadding off to London rather than being here on important business. I will be taking the chair today. So welcome, everyone. And do we have any apologies other than Mr. Parks? George? Oh, sorry.
Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Mike Parks and Tony Elford, and Councillor Holloway hasn't given apologies, but he's attended online.
Thank you. Declaration of interest. Are there any declarations of interest that anyone wishes to make? Thank you. No one. And can I ask for a proposer and seconder, because we're being asked to approve the minutes of meetings held on the 24th of October and the 19th. First of all, the 24th of October. Are you all content with those minutes? And are you proposing and seconding Stella and Beryl, I think? Thank you. And are you all content with the minutes of the 19th of December? Do I have a proposer? Do I have a seconder? Beryl, Stella. Thank you very much. Councillor Jones, Councillor Ezard. Thank you. Public participation, we have no questions. We have no questions from members. We have no urgent items. So we go straight into the Children in Care and Care Leavers Strategy update. Thank you. So who is leading on this?
Good morning. My name is Louise Drury. I'm the Head of Service for Children in Care and Care Leavers, and will be presenting this report to committee this morning. The recommendation from this report is to ask that People and Health Overview Committee note the contents of the update and the progress that has been made, particularly in relation to the delivery of the sufficiency strategy. And also asking further to recommend to Cabinet that there is an average of a 15% increase in the overall payment for Dorset foster carers and supported lodgings carers. And we believe that the reason for this recommendation is really to progress the work to ensure that we have sufficient foster carers for our children in care and also supported lodgings carers, and also to ensure that the overall payment and support actually recognises the value of our carers and the role they play for our children in care. Within the national landscape, we can see that there are a number of things that have had an impact on our sufficiency for our children in care. In particular, the National Transfer Scheme, where we have seen a sharp rise in the number of unaccompanied children in care and supported by us as care leavers. We've sought to engage really constructively with the National Transfer Scheme throughout, although there are some challenges with this. This includes we've not always been able to source sufficient accommodation for our children within Dorset, and so a number of our young people are living outside of the Dorset area. And also a number of our young people are unwilling to transfer to Dorset and have really expressed that preference to be housed in urban centres. We've also seen the Competition and Marketing Authority publishing a report in March 2022, which recognised the challenges that are being experienced within the market, particularly around profits being excessive in the private sector, and also recognising that foster care, local foster care, is so much better for our children, in addition to being more cost effective, but also improving outcomes for our children and supporting our children to be close to the people and places that are important to them. We've also seen the independent review of children's social care and anticipating final publication this week, but we know that some of the areas of focus within this will include our foster care recruitment and services for foster carers. A national survey of foster carers also identifies the challenges that within the cost of living, that are the challenges that our foster carers are experiencing, particularly around the rising cost of living, resulting in the cost of caring almost feeling untenable for many foster carers, both local authority and independent, risking young children and young people's stability and well-being. Within our local context, we currently have 400, as of today, whilst the report is identifying 457 children in care in Dorset, we actually have as of today 449. And as identified, the significant influence around this has been through the National Transfer Scheme. The majority of our children are cared for by foster carers, with nearly half being cared for by Dorset foster carers. We have improved the percentage of children in care who are placed 20 miles away from home, less than 25 miles away from home. And also the number of children living out of county remains very similar. But then we must bear in mind that a number of those children are actually living with family members or friends through connected care arrangements. We continue to have a focus on achieving permanence for our children in care, and we can see in the last year that improvements have been made in achieving long-term fostering, adoption, and also supporting our children to return home safely to their parents. The Children's Social Work Act of 2017 extended the service offer for young people leaving care up to their 25th birthday. In Dorset, there are 512 young people aged between 18 to 25 who have left our care, so that's larger than our number of children who are in care. And of those, 289 are receiving a service from the Leaving Care team. The majority of our young people are steady and settled, living in independent accommodation. 20 young people have remained with their foster carers through staying put, and 17 are supported in supported lodgings. At the time of writing, we had 15 young people in unsuitable accommodation, and I'm pleased to advise that that has reduced to 9 young people. Still too high, but we are working with that. Earlier this year, we undertook a survey, Your Life Beyond Care, with our care leavers to find out about how they felt about their lives. And we have celebrated some really clear bright spots of work. And this included young people being able to describe the support that they're receiving, sustained trusted relationships with their personal advisor, much better internet access and access to smartphones, and also having a better network of supportive relationships and reduced feelings of loneliness. But an area of focus that we continue to pay attention to includes housing, because too many of our young people are saying that actually that they're living in accommodation that they don't feel is right for them. So as of the 30th of September, there were 191 Dorset foster caring households, of which 126 were mainstream and 59 are connected persons. This number has reduced, and whilst that may be of a concern, what we have seen alongside that is an increase in the utilisation rate of 25%. So what this means is that more of our children are living with Dorset foster carers, and more Dorset foster carers are looking after more of our children, if that makes sense. However, the challenges for fostering recruitment are being noted nationally, and we're experiencing that within Dorset. Retention of our foster carers and supported lodgings is really critical, and we are very much paying attention to the support that we offer to our foster carers, particularly around the offer of a psychologist, the development of our Mockingbird programme, and our visits to our foster carers, which we can see have absolutely increased. And also foster carers are reporting back to us, so we have a number of forums that we attend, that they are feeling better supported, which is much better. I've included in the report a table which provides a comparison between Dorset Council and other local authorities in terms of the payments. I would add some caution to this, because I think in bits it feels a little bit like we could be comparing apples with pears, purely because different authorities, while the majority of authorities do have the same sort of remuneration scheme, sometimes what is published is not always at the same rate as what we're so, you know, the skills level of 1 for a child aged 0 to 4. So it does give us a benchmark, but also I think it's worth recognising that actually carers who would be living in Devon and Hampshire would not be wanting to foster for us in Dorset anyway, but it is just a table for comparison. What we can see is that what we know is that at the end of October, the average weekly cost for an independent fostering association placement was over £1,000. At the same time, the average cost for an independent residential children's home was in excess of £4,000. And at the end of October, the average weekly cost for a Dorset Council fostering placement was £372. In addition to the financial benefit of having more of our own carers, we also recognise that we have greater assurance in the quality of our carers, and we're also able to provide placements for children that are close to people and places that are important to them. By way of update in relation to the Harbour and Dorset Children's Homes, the Harbour, as you'd be aware, is the integrated service for children and young people who are on the edge of care and leaving care. Since December 2020, the team have worked with over 153 young people. Of these, 100 young people were on the edge of care, and we have been able to support 94% of those young people remaining safely at home with their families. We've also seen a reduction in the number of young people 13 plus entering care and those placed in residential children's homes out of the county. And the number of first-time entrants to the youth justice system has halved. We have also welcomed grants that we have received, in particular from the DFE, to support the development of Mockingbird, which is an extended family model, and has been evaluated to show improved stability for our foster placements and strengthened relationships between carers, children and young people. We've recruited our first hub home carer and, launched our first constellation in November, and we have further recruited another 2 hub home carers and anticipate by the end of this year that we'll have 5 constellations in place, which is really good going. We've also had a further grant from the DFE for Staying Close, which is a model which provides enhanced support for young people leaving care from children's homes and is really designed to be comparable to the option of staying put. The grant, which runs over 3 years, creates those opportunities to enhance the leaving care service through the development of 2 personal advisor roles, champion personal advisor roles, one leading Staying Close and the other leading employer engagement. And these lead areas correlate to those identified by young people through New Belongings survey and create a really good career opportunity for a pathway in the leaving care team. So in terms of future developments, work is in progress with the ICB, Integrated Care Board, and other health partners to design a service that will meet the needs of children and young people who are experiencing mental distress. And also developments are also underway to increase our capacity to care for and support unaccompanied children. So in terms of financial implications, if an average of a 15% uplift were to be made available for the overall payment, this would amount to an additional £557,671 per annum. The amount also includes an enhancement for carers who are offering a home to teenagers and also a proportionally higher increase for level 1 carers. And this is really intended to incentivise the recruitment of new carers and those with an interest in caring for teenagers and supports our sufficiency strategy. If the above inflationary increase is applied, we know that there will still be capacity for growth within the fostering service of 20 placements. The additional cost of 15% increase on the cohort of young people in staying put would be 13,000, just over 13,000, and also the same for supported accommodation arrangements would be just over 16,000. We know that the recruitment of Dorset foster carers is much more cost effective. It reduces the amount spent on high-cost external residential placements and really supports our local economy. It also supports our focus on environmental implications, reducing travel time, because we can see that there are currently 150 children living in care in independent provision outside of Dorset. And if we can bring our children closer, then that will have a positive environmental impact too. Thank you.
I'm Councillor Cathy Lugg from Ferndown North. I'm fully in support of the uplift of the allowance for foster carers. And I'd just like to comment, all of us here get an increase in either our council allowance every year or those who are paid members get yet we expect our foster carers to carry on year after year. We haven't given them an uplift for 5 years. I'd like to make a further recommendation that we look at fostering allowances every year. That's not to say that they will get an uplift every year, but I think we should be looking at it every year.
Thank you. I think that's something that can be... Teresa, do you wish to comment?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Lugg. So just for absolute clarity, the fostering allowances do get uplifted every year. We track with the national recommendation and that goes up every year. In addition to the fostering allowance, which is really allocated to the child's detail, foster carers also get a fee. And it's those fees that we haven't given an uplift to. So that they have had an increase year on year, but not on the fee element. Thanks.
Clarification.
Thank you for the clarification. We need to encourage more foster carers, and the support our social services give foster carers is far superior to independent agencies. And unless we encourage people with an attractive fee, they're not going to lose money by coming to us.
Thank you, Chairman. I wonder, you've mentioned unaccompanied minors. You've mentioned it in the report and this morning, and I just wondered if you could define it for me, please. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Paul Dempsey. I'm the Corporate Director for Care and Protection in Children's Services. Unaccompanied minors, you might have heard referred to as unaccompanied asylum seekers. So these are children, young people who come to us as part of the government's national transfer scheme. You will have seen, no doubt, in the national and local press news about unaccompanied asylum seekers coming to the country. Unaccompanied young people under 18 automatically become children in care of a local authority where they're transferred to. So they become part of our care population, and we have a responsibility to care for them in the same ways that we have a responsibility to care for local Dorset children who come into our care.
Stella Jones, Dorchester. First of all, I support this recommendation. I think it's essential for our foster carers to get more. They don't do it for the money, obviously. They do it because of their love of children. But they do need to make sure that they get the right amount of money. Can I ask about the foster carers who are out of county? Do they get paid the Dorset rate, or do they get paid, say, the Hampshire rate? I've got another question after that.
Thank you. Yes, they will receive, so Dorset carers receive Dorset rates. Is that okay? Even if out of county?
The unaccompanied children that we send out of county, there's been quite a lot of concern about unaccompanied children going missing and disappearing altogether. How do we make sure that the ones we send out of county are thoroughly followed and checked by our staff so that they don't actually disappear altogether?
Thank you. And just to, it is a really concerning picture, isn't it? And you're referring to particularly, I think, the press coverage of the Brighton Hotel recently, where we saw nationally a number of children trafficked and removed from that hotel. And it's a huge concern to all of us. And we want to make sure that our unaccompanied minors have exactly the same offer as any of our other children in care, and our care leavers in the same way. And so we are in the same level of contact with our 43 unaccompanied minors who are in our care at the moment, and our 45 care leavers who were unaccompanied minors, to make sure that they have exactly that same offer. It is, as it is with any of our children in care, harder when they're not close, but that doesn't mean that we don't require the same kind of response. And as I've said previously, I think we're very grateful to Councillor Biggs from the Corporate Parenting Board, who undertook a direct piece of work with young people recently to really travel around the country, hearing from them around what they wanted and what they needed. It is a complex picture. Some would happily come to Dorset, but others have a sense of wanting to be around people from their own communities, and that is much more likely to be in some urban centres than it is in our lovely county of Dorset. So we're working with that to really think about how we make that work. Clearly, the other challenge we face when they're not local is making sure that they can access the healthcare and education that we want them to access to, and that just takes more partnership and more coordination from our virtual school. But all of those responsibilities are exactly the same as if they were children in our care or children in the Dorset boundaries.
Thank you.
Can I just say that I hope we can encourage as many of them as possible to want to come and live in Dorset and then build up a community in Dorset.
Councillor Jones. Councillor Ezard, were you indicating you wish to speak?
Thank you. Yes, I really would like to endorse the fact that, there should be an uplift in the payment to, foster carers. What I'm worried about is when reading through the paper, and I know you read it out, that the number of foster carers that are starting the system and then, don't actually fulfil and come through to actually be foster carers. And I wonder what is the hurdles that stop or, sort of put them off, as it were, at the end of the day. Is it the lack of, for wanting other words, is it the right age of children, or is it, where they are or their own circumstances change? Could you define that a bit more, please? Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's a great question. And it's an area where we really focus heavily on. And some of those families that fall through and out of the assessment process will be connected carers. And that will be because either ourselves or the fostering panel in their recommendation to the agency decision maker really consider that actually the family are not potentially safe enough or the right match for this child. So it can be very complicated sometimes with a child where there are a number of connected carers coming forward. You might have auntie, uncle and grandma who all want to have an assessment undertaken. So it's right that some fall by the wayside. But where we have, and it's not a great phrase, but where we have stranger carers going through the assessment, we want to be really sure, as you'd all expect us to, that the people that we approve to take care of other people's children are safe and sound and effective in that. We should be able to do that really effectively, really quickly, in order to have some of those kind of safety checks. But sometimes simply going through the process of assessment, people reconnect with an old loss or grief, or they reconnect with something that they haven't completely resolved, and they suddenly find themselves not quite ready yet for the fostering task. But it would certainly be, in that case, a time to be saying to somebody, well, let's come away for a little while and we'll come back to you in a few months' time when you've actually had a chance to resolve that. Because often it's not until people start to go through that assessment process that they realise that actually there's something there that's going to get in the way of them caring for what is often a traumatised child if they don't deal with that personal issue themselves. So we see a range of reasons. It's rarely any particular hurdles that we put in place. Good opportunity really for me to say, if you've got a spare room and if you have no offences against children and you have a big enough heart and mind, please do come and foster for Dorset.
Of advertising, Teresa. Beryl.
Back and say, well, I mean, if the families do go through and get to the sort of end where they're ready to foster, and they've ticked all the boxes and done all the hurdles. What is the waiting time normally between when they're ready to foster and when actually that happens? Because I've known of a family that waited a long time, and it was a few years ago now, but seemed to wait a long time, and they gave up because they wanted a child that was fairly near to the age of their other child, and that they felt that the child had got too old for having a sibling that was what they would like. So and so I know there's constraints in that way, but is that a slight stumbling block in the fact that you can never get the right age or the right sort of match easily, and it must be very difficult because it's a really complicated jigsaw puzzle. But how do you get round that? How do you keep people on the boil, as it were, and on side? Yeah, thank you.
The answer to the question, it varies, the timescale in which someone's ready after they're approved. So in theory, and sometimes in practice, a family is ready on the same day that they are approved as a registered foster carer by the agency decision maker. Often they're not. There might still be some things they need to do to their property to get ready. There may be some work that we might want to do with them to prepare them, our social workers, but most of that should have been done in the assessment and preparation stage. They would have already had a significant amount of training in that assessment stage as well. The match is really important. So some families are approved to look after children of either gender, age 0 to 18, which means that we've got quite a big area to match a child with their family circumstances. Other families are approved to look after children, for example, aged 0 to 5, sometimes of a particular gender, not always. Or sometimes it might be a bit like the example I think you was given, it might be an 8 to 10-year-old child because it fits in with their birth children in their family. So where it's a tight match, where we're looking for a particular type of child or young person that presents particular challenges, often less challenges, then that's more difficult to match. But we would always be going through an assessment with a family with the expectation that we do have children that they could foster, otherwise we would be wasting their time and our time. So I don't know the particular example that you mentioned, but we would be working really hard to make sure that we used foster carers as soon as we could, because that's why they've gone through a very long sort of testing assessment phase, and we need foster carers to look after our children. So we're working very hard to match them as soon as we can and make sure everyone benefits.
Just come back and say thank you for that, but how long does it take to go through the process from start to finish as well? That sort of, is it 6 months, 18 months, 2.5 years? I mean, it must be quite a longish process, but what's the average sort of thing?
It used to be 9 months. We're much better now. We should be doing it in 6 months. And there is a national standard around 6 months, and we are averaging about 6 months. It can vary, of course. A family might want to say to us halfway through an assessment, actually, we need some time. A bit like Teresa was saying, we need some time to think about this and work some things out. Can we come back to it? So obviously we would do that and go back to that family when they were ready. But in terms of the processes that our social workers go through, they should be getting through an assessment and a training programme in 6 months, and by and large we're doing that.
Thank you, Councillor Azad.
Assure Councillor Azad that everything is as it should be. Dorset Council undertake a rigorous process to keep our children safe, and we are acting within 6 months at the moment, and we're approving some really good people. But the main consideration is those children and keeping them safe, and we don't want to approve anybody who is not suitable and is going to cause further harm to that child.
Thank you, Councillor Lugg. If no one else has any question, Councillor Jones and Councillor Ezard, you both said you supported the recommendation. Can I take that as a proposal and a seconding? And are we all in favour that we should support the recommendation going to Cabinet that there is a 15% increase in overall payments for Dorset foster carers and supported lodging carers? So, thank you. We're all in favour. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, team.
Agreed, Chairman.
Yes. And our next item is the schools admissions arrangements and coordinated scheme. Mr. Denham.
Good morning. Thank you. Ed Denham, I'm admissions manager and school place planning officer. The paper before committee today details our annual statutory duty to review, consult and determine our admissions arrangements for schools in Dorset. The suite of policies, apologies, they are extensive, but each has their little niche area of responsibility that we have to ensure that we have detailed correctly for various audiences, including the offices of the schools adjudicator and the local government ombudsman as well, to make sure that we are treating this very delicate area of business in terms of how families apply for school places, and where there is oversubscription, i.e. where too many families want to go to a particular school, that there is absolute total transparency and consistency in the way that we allocate places to those oversubscribed schools. We have consulted this year for the statutory 6 weeks, and the responses, of which we rarely get responses. This is a well-trodden path, but what responses we had are detailed in the report. The suite of policies before you for recommendation to Cabinet, I will just go through them one by one, if I may, and just give highlights. The coordinated admission scheme timetable details literally the dates that we as a local authority will endeavour to do various different components of the process of allocating, leading up to, in terms of secondary, National Offer Day of the 1st of March, and in terms of primary is the National Offer Day on the 16th of April. So it details when we will exchange information with neighbouring local authorities, exchange details with our schools and our own admission authority schools, who have their own responsibilities in terms of allocating and providing information to us to communicate with families. But that's just a set of dates for all parties and stakeholders to adhere to. The primary coordinated scheme and the secondary coordinated scheme are quite detailed documents, just explaining the process step by step that we undertake, what our families and our other stakeholders can expect from us in the way that we will deal with applications and process them and notify families of the outcomes of their applications. And these are for those children starting in reception, those who may be starting at junior school in year 3, middle school in year 5, and secondary school in year 7, and upper school in year 9. So those two detail and give that detail that we can then be held accountable to. The in-year coordinated scheme does a similar job, but it's how we then manage those children who make applications during the academic year, and how we will look after them, and again, the service that families should expect from the Dorset Admission Service to ensure that those applications are treated fairly and appropriately and transparently, again, in the allocation of places to our Dorset schools. The fifth one, the admissions arrangements for community and voluntary controlled schools, is probably sort of a central piece to this suite of policies, and this details where we are directly responsible for deciding which children get into the community and voluntary controlled schools, albeit a diminishing number of schools, but we still have that admission authority responsibility, direct authority responsibility for the allocation of places. And that document details, again, how we will allocate places if the schools are oversubscribed. And it obviously in that we acknowledge absolutely that children with education, health and care plans will be admitted. Then there's absolute top priority of looked after and previously looked after children with also an international element to that, which was introduced in the 2021 DFE admissions code. And then we have various other ones looking at siblings, catchment, children living within catchment, and children living out of catchment, but who maybe have a sibling in the school. There's also the feeder school criteria as well. And that's all detailed about what the definition of those criteria is and the order with which we will allocate places until the school is full. As I say, when there is oversubscription in those schools. So that's the sort of key one for parents. They want to know how places are being allocated to the school that they want their children to go to, and is it being done consistently and fairly and transparently. So that's the admissions arrangements. We've then also got admissions to maintained nursery units and sixth form admissions policy, again, for the few remaining institutions that we have responsibility for. But those again detail how, when, very rarely those are they're oversubscribed, how families can expect to be treated in that fair and honest and open way when they're seeking places at those institutions. The penultimate set of guidance is how we as a local authority, in admitting children to the community and voluntary control schools, if a family wishes to refer to as back hearing, but where they wish the child possibly to wait a year before entering reception, or they might feel that their child is struggling in a year group, or the school and the parent may agree that a child who's on roll is struggling. And again, what's the process for parents to be able to engage with the system, to ask that their child may be educated in a year group other than what they would normally be in. And that's, it's a critical statutory duty to have this policy. So there's the deceleration, so i.e. a child may want to stay in nursery until they pass their 5th birthday and then join reception, the first year of primary or first school, or they may wish just not to start school after their 4th birthday, but may want to go into year 1 after their 5th birthday. Again, that's all detailed in that policy about what families need to do. And it also details what families need to do when a child comes to a transfer point if they've already been in a year group behind their chronological year group, because they've got to engage with the next school in line and start to talk to the school about why they want the child to remain in the back year, as we call it. But it makes sure that families are aware of what the challenges are, what the processes are, so that they can plan accordingly to make sure that if they feel that's appropriate for their child, they can then ask that of the system. And that's the guidance on placement outside of normal or chronological age group. And then finally, we have the Armed Forces policy, which is again our commitment in admissions to the Armed Forces Covenant to make sure that those who are in the armed forces are not prejudiced because of their service, because of posting orders and because of changes in dress. And we make sure that we have a system where we can look sympathetically at service applications to make sure that they are able to get an equitable access to school places, especially where they have to change postings mid-year, or they get late notification of postings so that they may not be able to make applications for a transfer, a point of entry, on time. So we detail there about how they can engage with the system. The system can support them to ensure that they get the best chances of securing a local school place if that's what they wish. So that's the suite of policies that is here before the committee.
Comprehensive journey through that vast range of policies that I think fill us all with dread when they appear. Thank you, Ed. Any questions? Beryl Ezard and Councillor Knox and Councillor Dunseith.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Ed. It's very good. I was just wondering about catchment areas, because this always comes up, and you haven't really mentioned that in here, unless I didn't look at all the policies. But are there any changes to catchment areas, and are there any real problems? I'm thinking particularly in my patch in Purbeck, because there were questions last year about one particular school saying about catchment areas, and I'm sure that the Cabinet member is aware of that. But I'm not saying particularly that, but is the catchment areas changed, or is there any movement on that in the future, or likely to be? Thank you.
Yes, no, thank you for that. No, there are no, in this set of arrangements, there are no plans to change catchment areas of any schools at this time. When the local authority does want to engage with schools and the communities around a change in catchment areas, it will stand as its own separate consultation. We wouldn't do it within this consultation, because the delicacy and the significance of a change would be quite considerable. So it'll always stand alone if we were making those changes. Most catchment areas are historic. A lot of schools are based on parish boundaries, and unless there is school closures and stuff like that, that's usually the time that we may have to look at catchment area changes, or there's a significant change in the levels of population in an area. Would we start to look at those particular issues? But we would always want to make sure that sort of historical links from one community, for a community into a particular school, we would always retain those links where possible, unless it became really challenging to do so. Where with the academy's situation and the free school situation, when a school sets themselves up or is agreed, they do have the right to look at their catchment area for admissions purposes, and they will consult with us, and we will engage and discuss any proposals and any challenges that they may be. But the other role of the catchment area, those schools do have that right, those independent schools, if you like, the academies do have that right to revisit those, but we would always be wary of confusion for families or prejudice to neighbouring schools about any changes that may occur.
A supplementary?
Yeah, in that case, if they're taken as separate consultations, can we be assured that the local members are aware of what's going on? Because a lot of parents, I mean, we're out in the community, and there's a lot of parents that actually, come to us and talk to us, and if we don't know exactly what's going on, we may be, giving wrong information or clouding the issue when really we should know. I'm not biased one way or the other. I mean, from having academies or independent schools or whatever, but I just we need to know exactly how we can put it to parents and as the situation as it crops up, so we know when these consultations and things come up. And I think it's important that the local members know. And it's actually, even if it was confidential or whatever, that we are, you know, and we let know. And it's important that that is something that we are aware of. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Parry.
Thank you. Perhaps I could respond to part of that question. When there have been occasions of significant consultations on schools, I have endeavoured to have sensitive conversations with appropriate members in those localities so that they are in a position to be able to brief their parish and town councils when undoubtedly those matters will be raised with them. Inevitably, I think there's a learning from every time we've been through this process, and we do want to understand that. And one of the things that I think we will want to focus on is not only the initial awareness of it, but the follow-up conversations, including what would happen with a site once it has been vacated, for example, has been in the case of a school in Wimborne, and that piece of work is still ongoing. In your particular area, I can assure you where you have this, if I can politely describe it, as a bit of a mixed economy between Purbeck and the Swanage School. With Swanage School being a free school, I know that the two members in the Swanage ward take a very active interest and regularly discuss with me the Swanage School. And as one of those, of course, is our Paymaster General in Councillor Suttle. He is somebody I'm very keen to keep on the right side of for the benefit of children across the county.
Thank you, Councillor Parry. And I next have Councillor Knox, then Councillor Dunseith, then Councillor Lugg, and now Councillor Jones.
Hi, thanks, Chairman. This might seem sort of deviating into an area of policy which is extremely difficult to tackle, but just based on the experience I've had, I think most emails I get about schools is the link to transport. And I know that in the admissions to schools guide, there is mention that any parent or guardian or responsible person must check and ensure they understand the financial costs of choosing a school outside a catchment, but they don't. And I think it is a regular one, particularly in terms of where a parent, guardian, responsible person has relied on another part of our bus network, and that timetable changes, and it just gets worse and worse and unravels into extremely difficult conversations. So I think this is really just a plea to make it even more obvious, really out there, that a choice of school, if there is going to be a choice out of catchment, means a financial burden to that family, whatever it looks like, for the rest of the child's time at that school. It cannot rely on other areas of the council to support or change a timetable just in order to ensure that travel arrangement. And thinking back, I think it was a year ago, it might have been 2 years ago, we got the school travel policy document at this committee, and it was a minefield. And I know, Ed, you work really hard and you try and link up the two, but it's incredibly difficult. But I think it'd be really important as a communications effort is to really, really highlight how difficult this is. And you don't just choose a school for that year just because your best friend might be there. This is something which really matters financially and to your community and to your future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Knox. I next have Councillor Dunseith wishing to speak.
Thank you. I believe there are several schools in this area that have applied to have their numbers reduced, and I believe this is a national trend. Would these developments have any impact on your suite of policies, please, Ed? Thank you.
Academies can do their own consultation on their own admissions arrangements, which they are duty-bound to do if there's a change, just in the way that we have done. They don't have to consult if there's no change, but if they do have to do a consultation, if they intend changing or reducing their PAN, and they do make us aware of those decisions, we, as a local authority, have occasionally challenged those decisions where we feel that we would be hindered in delivering our duty to ensure that there's sufficiency of places across the county. So we will challenge and have those discussions with the school about how to support them, given the motivation that they may have in reducing numbers. We do understand the schools need to do that. And we will be made aware and we will document that. But we will also help those academies to ensure that they do make sure that consultation is as wide as possible, members included. We encourage them to do that, or more than encourage, I think we should say, to ensure that members are involved in those discussions as well, and what is good quality consultation when they make those decisions. We, as a local authority, if we are making changes to a PAN for one of our schools, we will go out to consultation. We will engage with local members where, in order to explain the justification for it, and obviously local schools where we are doing, we are undertaking those changes. But they will be robust in terms of making sure that there is still sufficiency of numbers after the reduction, but the reduction is usually in a duty to support schools where there may be significant budgetary constraints, and actually that they are holding too much surplus capacity, and that there's a risk to, they're holding a risk because they have to staff the school to that level, yet they know that the children are not going to come. And so it's a pragmatic decision to reduce capacity because the demand is not in the area. But we will scrutinise each of those proposals, whether they come from us or from one of our schools, to make sure that local places for local children is still the underlying philosophy of the admissions portfolio.
Councillor Lugg and then Councillor Jones.
Having been in the situation where I followed my late husband with 3 children, inevitably arriving in the middle of a term, and because of their ages had to apply for 3 different schools which are inevitably full. This is great news. And as Dorset has so many army families, I just think, you know, we're on to a winner.
Thank you, Councillor Lugg. Councillor Jones.
Yes, it's good that parents have a choice of where they can send their children, but we do have schools that are oversubscribed. We have one in Dorchester, and it's so outstanding that people come from Weymouth and all over the place to this school, and sometimes local people can't get to their own local school. This is a problem. So I think our aim, which is a hard aim, is to make sure that every school in Dorset is excellent, provides excellent education, welcoming schools, and so that parents are happy to go to the school in their local area rather than have to send children away, because it's difficult for children. When I was teaching in Dorchester, people were so concerned about getting into the upper school in Dorchester, which has an excellent record, that their 5-year-olds were travelling from Weymouth to Dorchester so that they would get on the system so they could then go into the upper school. And this is wrong for young children. So it is much better if children go to their local schools, but we have to make sure that all those schools are excellent. And that's a big aim, I know.
Councillor Parry.
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Jones, for highlighting, of course, one of the stated aims of our council, which is that every child in Dorset should go to a good or outstanding school. That is a minimum requirement. We are ambitious for our children and young people. We want them to succeed and we want them to thrive, and that very much starts in those fantastic schools that we have across the county. What we do tend to see, of course, is that all our schools have a culture of inclusion, and we want to see that further expanded, because what has become quite clear is that some schools are able to outwardly project that culture of inclusion to families, and therefore they become inundated with requests, particularly in the area of special educational needs and disability, for requests for their child to attend there. What we want to do is ensure, of course, that families have every confidence in any school in Dorset delivering the requirements that meet their child's needs.
Councillor Parry. Everyone has spoken apart from Councillor Holloway, and I am keeping an eye open just to see if there's an indication there should you wish to speak, Ryan. But otherwise, I'm looking for a proposer and a seconder, because we're being asked to recommend to Cabinet that the 9 policies that make up the school admissions arrangements and coordinated scheme be approved. Who is prepared to propose? Beryl and Councillor Dunseith. Thank you. Are you all in favour of making this recommendation? Thank you.
Agreed, Madam Chair.
Thank you. The voice from the distance. I've just been reminded by George Ryan that whilst we are delighted to have you coming in from the distance, you actually don't have a vote. I'm so sorry to disappoint you on that one.
Okay, thank you for reminding me, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Whoops. With family hubs, and Therese, you're going to introduce this item, we're recommended to comment on the service delivery model and support the approach to implementation. And there is the possibility being suggested of a committee visit to a family hub. And could I put a vote in there for Triggett's Cross, please? Thank you. Right.
Thank you. With apologies from Claire Shields, who's produced this report, she's having a very well-deserved holiday. So while she's sitting in the sun, we're going to just take ourselves into a future time where we've got a range of family hubs across our fabulous county. And this is an update to the previous papers in September 2021 and May 2022, which talked about both our own local ambition, which was then matched both in terms of ambition and some funding with the Department of Education. And we are now one of 12 national pilot sites developing and opening family hubs across the county. So the recommendation is that comment on the service delivery model and support the approach to implementation, endorse it, and take a further report to monitor that into the future. So we've talked about the development of family hubs previously. We know that it's an opportunity for our families to be able to access help and support sooner and locally, completely in line with the rest of our policy and our strategy around getting help locally where you need it and in the ways that you need it. And that help is varied, and it varies across family need, and it varies across the age of children, the adults, and the entire family around that space. Where we know we're looking to invest both capital and revenue funding, some of that funded by the DFE and some of it from our own transformation programme. We do anticipate that the family hubs rollout will be able to create some revenue savings for the council, and again that's detailed within the report. Where we see those savings would be in the same way as we see the savings for the rest of our model, which is around getting families help sooner, being able to support families to be healthy and happy together for longer and in their communities, and working with those communities to see that delivered. You heard earlier some of the huge impact of the harbour on our most vulnerable young people on those edge of care, and a huge turnaround in terms of having that really dedicated, focused local service. So we know that we want our family hubs to be accessible, we want them to be connected, and by that we mean really interconnected and integrated with other services, and that's very much the model that we're looking to. And we want it to be based on relationships. Everything our families tell us in our early help space at the present time is that it's the relationships with their workers that make the biggest difference. It's important to have good places and spaces to sometimes spend that time with each other, but the real important element, the kind of magic in this, is all about the relationship between our staff and others. And others, because the issue for us in this is very much about it being a partnership piece. So the future plan would look for the family hub network to be established by June 23 and some family hubs open. You'll appreciate, because this is both a capital and a revenue activity, some of those capital conversations are going to take a little bit longer. It's going to take us a little bit longer to identify the right spaces to deliver our family hubs from, and that's all work in progress at the present time. But we're anticipating by March 2024 that the hub network will have matured and all hubs will have been identified, and the majority will be open with an outreach programme in place. We're very alive to the fact that there are some communities in our county where it's very obvious where the hub should be, and it's very straightforward, and it's a place where families have advised us and already told us that's a place where they want to go for help. Some other parts of our county are not so straightforward, either because of the way in which our demography and our geography is, or because there just isn't a space where we've been able to identify that at the moment. So we're spending time listening deeply to our communities, thinking with them about where do they want to access that help and support from, and what's the right place for us to think about the Family Hub's delivery space. Once again, the publication of the Children's Social Care Report on Thursday, anticipated this week, will helpfully, I think, reinforce this policy and reinforce the message of the way in which Dorset Council are progressing through their family help model. But we'll need to be very careful and alive to how those family help models may need to adapt subtly around some of our planning. So lots of work going on already. As I've said, the availability of local transport networks is an issue for us. We've had transport again a couple of times already in this session, and we know what a challenge that is for families. So in acknowledgement of that, some of the Family Hub network will also be virtual. Some families and some young people have told us very clearly that they would welcome the opportunity of being able to communicate with a helper, with a practitioner, online rather than face-to-face. We also know, and it's really clear from lots of the kind of footprint traffic, particularly around our SEND work, that many families seek help online after office hours. Perfectly understandable, get everybody to bed, house is finally settled, I've got time to have a little think and look around how I might get some support and help. So really making sure that our digital family offer is really strong is also part of that whole programme. So you've got the detail in the paper. I'm not going to say much more about that at this time. The financial implications are there, and you can see that the initial pilot areas are listed as Trickett's Cross in Ferndown, which will operate a partnership hub, Lee Park in Wimborne, which will operate as a family hub operated by Dorset Council, and Swanage, which will also operate as a partnership hub. Happy to take any questions, and I'm ably joined by Amanda Davis, who was previously the lead for early help and now our corporate director for education, who will be able to also talk about any wider early help information should you want to. Thank you.
Councillor Knox.
Thank you, Chairman. This is really good news, absolutely brilliant. But I think there's one word missing, GP. And I'm surprised that that hasn't been intertwined at this early stage of potentially that relationship between our primary health partners. So can we just have that assurance? Because I sit on that ICP integrated board partnership stakeholder, very complicated system with the NHS. This is the sort of thing that I would have liked to have been on the agenda of our meeting last week, to show an actual tangible partnership going forward. And it just slightly unnerves me that it isn't obvious in here of where that discussion is happening, because it's not hitting the strategy, the strategic partnership. It might be sitting at the working partnership, that's great, but this is really high level and needs a culture buy-in and a relationship buy-in. Can you expand on any of that at all, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Knox, and we share your ambition to link robustly with primary care networks. So where we have those relationships already at a practitioner level, we're utilising those to link closely to family hubs. Every local alliance group, so our early help local group, if you like, who have a vested interest in great outcomes for children. We have a primary care network representative now. We didn't have that at the beginning. We've 2 local alliance groups to grow that. So we absolutely share your ambition, and we know where primary care networks are closely linked to our work, and we know where they're not. So we're working as part of this work to develop that and closely link the services.
Sorry, just to come back on something. That's absolutely brilliant to hear. This isn't a very popular view at times, but where things aren't working, I'd like to know. I'm afraid I'm a bit of a namer and a shamer, because it then galvanises either local communities or councillors, or gives us the knowledge to actually help and try and do something about it. So if it is in my ward that it is not working, I would like to know about it. I don't want to know about other people's, but I would really like to know where it's not and where we might be able to broker success. So please let us know if you can. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Knox. Teresa, do you want to come back?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Knox. Absolutely right. I think this is the matter for the ICB. Couldn't agree with you more. And I think the level of challenge around such system change and a huge amount of conversation around that system change rather than actually beginning to see where we actually are going to be able to make some big impact remains a big challenge for us. So I accept the challenge, thank you. And I will speak with the colleagues to make sure that we can have some of those opportunities in that broader place. I would also say that what we learned a lot about in terms of local alliance groups is that sometimes it's around getting the right chemistry, it's just about getting the right people together, and that takes a huge amount of partnership work, doesn't it? It takes a real sort of delicate balance between support and challenge. But absolutely, if we're not getting where we need to get to, some of our go-to people, our first go-to people for us are our councillors. So thank you.
I now have Councillor Ezard wanting to speak and no other committee members at this point. I know Councillor Jones, you wish to speak.
Thank you. Yes, I actually visited Trickett's Cross last week and talked to Tom. And Tom's come to actually the Purbeck Youth Centre with a view of what might come in the future. But obviously we've got one at Swanage. And the different models you've got here, in theory, it looks really good on paper, but I think it's going to be really, really complex. And also to actually pull in all of the organisations and the voluntary groups that really will make this work is going to be quite tricky to get the balance right in actually serving the community for families. And I do think that there's still a lot of work to do, actually. Having talked to, the people at Trickett's Cross, I was there a couple of hours, that really it's still really a very infant stage, isn't it, from the point of view of forming what will be the final outcome for families. And although you can say, well, we'll have everything more or less, I know it's not about buildings, but families want to know where they can go, and they may be signposted to go elsewhere in the community for certain things. I do think that the actual model here, which I hadn't really looked at before I looked at the paper, that a lot of it could be digital and online. I think combining the two rather than separating it, I think is really, really what is needed, so you can combine all these things together. But I'm a bit sceptical about being able to pull this off, about being able to get it right, and it may take quite a few stumbles along the way to really, get the right model for the right areas, because different areas need different things. But in essence and theory, I think it's good, and I'm really all for it. And if there's anything that members can help with, then I'm there. So really do include as many people in their local, environments as you can to bring this about. And I think that with obviously it's a government thing that's steering this from the outset, and some money's coming from there. It never seems to be enough, and I think we do need to lobby for more funds to actually make sure this does work for families, and we don't feel that we've got a pinched service that we're handing out. And I think it is, like you say, underpinned by the comprehensive digital family offer that you're talking about, and delivering with high quality, because people do see through it if they're not getting the help that they need. And I think that that's so important to actually achieve that fairly early on. Thank you very much.
You wish to come back?
Thank you. Well, that's a challenge, isn't it? But this team, you know, if you take the children's services staff and team, what runs through them really heavily is community and engagement and partnership. And so that's why we are confident that we'll deliver this. That's why we are confident that we will absolutely engage with others to see what needs to be done and have it done where and how it needs to be done. And that doesn't mean it'll all be delivered by Dorset Council. That would be deceiving people. What's absolutely critical is that we see the right levels of help delivered across those different models, whether it's partnership, whether it is the Dorset Council itself, or whether it's in a different way. But I'm really confident that actually the Strategic Alliance for Children and Young People that's chaired by Councillor Parry has been driving our partnership for many years now. And those local alliances, which are absolutely driven by the local partnership, and you know, always getting there, always improving. Sometimes change of personnel makes for some need to regrow those areas, but that's where we'll see the kind of magic take place. We will do this with people, not to them or not for them, and I think in doing that we'll be much more successful. I would just want to say that the other element that's difficult in partnership working sometimes is to make sure that we all share the culture of what we're looking to achieve for families. And I've frequently said in this chamber that talking about keeping families at home together, safe and sound, is actually a business about managing risk. It's not always soft and warm and fuzzy. Families are having a very difficult time right now. There are some very significant risks and some very significant need with our children, young people and their extended families. And so we need to work ever more as a partnership in achieving that. And that is a challenge. It's a difficult job. A huge amount of our work is actually about management of anxiety and management of risk. And it's the hardest part of the work in many ways. So really keen to do that in partnership, but that's where family hubs will be positioning themselves as much as in what might have previously been seen as kind of lower level need or risk. This is actually about working with those high-end families too. Thank you.
Parry, were you wishing to come back in at that point? I wasn't sure.
Thank you. Just a reflection on the challenges that we face as a council and we face as a children's services. You know, in our predecessor authority, something as simple as obtaining a commitment under the district and county model for council tax exemptions for care leavers was an impossible task, yet it was one of the first things we delivered as a new council, and we're rightly proud of that. The idea that we would have a children's services languishing in the bottom end of requires an improvement was something that we just simply weren't going to accept. So we set about delivering the children's services that Ofsted would view to be good and outstanding, and we've achieved that. We're unafraid of the challenge of delivering family hubs. We're excited by it. I don't want to steal the thunder of a future scrutiny committee, but I hope they will reflect well on our work. They may well want us to fine-tune a few things as we go along the way. That's all part of our mantra. We plan, we do, we'll review, and we'll make adjustments as required. But the family hub model has terrific potential in it. Delighted that we've had some government funding for it. I echo any comment around the chamber that we always welcome further government funding, and I know the leader lobbies our MPs and dispatches them up to Whitehall with a very clear message around that. But you know, we're grateful for the support that we've had, and please bear in mind that Dorset is on the front foot. We are leading on family hubs. We are not at the back of the queue for this as a county. We're right at the forefront of it, and we can be proud of that. And so, exciting times ahead for this. I really do hope the Overview Committee will give a rounding support going forward to any recommendations to Cabinet.
Thank you, Councillor Parry. In accordance with the principle of taking committee members first, could I ask you, Councillor Carol Jones, to wait for your turn, as it were? And I now have Councillor Lugg, Councillor Stella Jones, and then Councillor Dunseith.
I'm going to speak on this item, but I'm the chair of the East Dorset Local Alliance Group. I'm also on the advisory board of the new family hub in Tricketts, and I'm really positive about that we can do this. There's going to be setbacks along the way, but I think it's got to be a can-do attitude and getting everybody on board. And there's quite a lot of excitement in Tricketts from the partners. And of course, these relationships are already there in that area. And you may find that in your area, Beryl, that the relationships are already built. It's just getting them all into one space.
Thank you, Councillor Lugg. And Councillor Stella Jones, and then Councillor Dunseith.
The hubs are an excellent idea, and we're certainly looking forward to getting one in Dorchester. But in the meantime, local children's charities have been asking me how can we get involved in the hub, because they don't want to be sidelined, and I'm sure they won't be. Will they be part of the hub, these people? And I know they're involved in locality now, and they're really asking when is it going to happen, and how can we be part of it? And secondly, can I ask, in the rural areas, are parish councils being talked to, because they're the ones who have know what's going on in the ground, and it might be useful to talk to them if you're not doing already.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. So for sure, being part of your local alliance group is the best way to get the information around becoming part of the family hub. So I would implore anybody who's in that space to join with the local alliance group, because I think, as you've heard from others today, that's really the place where the magic happens. There will be a series of conversations. You can imagine, I think what I would absolutely support is this is a huge piece of work. Having all of those conversations at all those different levels, making sure we do this in co-production is a big challenge, and we're trying to sequence that a little bit over the next 12 months. But conversations we will be having. And certainly those towns and parishes, we have already, with the existing plans, had lots of conversations, and those have been really fruitful. So absolutely we'll be having those conversations too.
Next I have Councillor Dunseith.
Thank you, Chairman. I think these family hubs are a great idea, and I'm glad we're implementing them. But if I could just mention that south of the Ridgeway, we have a huge, well, the largest urban conurbation in our Dorset Council area of Chickrell and Weymouth and going up to Portland. And when can we have ours, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dunseith. And if you are all done, and if Councillor Ryan Holloway doesn't want to come in, no, in which case, Councillor Carol Jones, it's your floor.
Thank you. This is why I'm here. I just wonder how we are going to balance need against a budget, which, frankly, I don't think is enough. Certainly, if I look in the area of North Dorset, firstly, our alliance group is not working successfully at the moment, and I am a little bit concerned about that. But I feel, I mean, certainly the work we do in the pantry, we're embedded in families throughout the whole of North Dorset. And whilst a digital element might be fine, I think that's going to work better for those that are more organised, the sorts of families that know they've got issues and know where and actually access that help online. A lot of the people I've certainly come into contact with, they're so chaotic that they wouldn't be able to follow that through. They need a lot of one-to-one, they need mentoring. Certainly that's what we've been doing. I mean, we're now working with well over 340 families a week, and it's some of the complexities we're seeing are just absolutely off the scale. And I don't think a digital offering in our area would work for the people that really, really need it. And I'm just wondering whether we have any flexibility in going into reserves if we need some more capital investment to actually invest in a building or somewhere that we can get the right people together. Because we're working together, we've got our own citizens advisor now. We're working with Home Start, we're working with the social prescribing group, we've got a line straight into the GP. So we've got the contacts, but we don't have buildings, and I'm just worried that we don't have the budgets to do really what's needed. Thank you.
I think that probably sounds like a Councillor Parry response. I think we have a building we sort of have an eye on, but we don't own it. Councillor Parry.
Thank you. I think one of the things that we looked at initially, and we talk about the subtle adjustments we make as we go through the programme, was we very much looked at a digital offer, and for many residents, they will access a digital offer, and that is the way they would want to access service and support. For others, they would like a physical presence, and that would be a permanent position, as we've talked about in Trickett's Cross and other locations. The evolution part of it, I suppose, is the concept of a form of sort of pop-up provision. So in areas where you couldn't necessarily justify a high level of capital cost for a need that perhaps wouldn't be accessed to such a great extent as it would in perhaps some of the urban areas. Councillor Dunsea's mentioned that the Chesley area has been a very prominent area of large population likely to have a high level of access. In some of our rural locations, and some of the wards in Dorset I know are far more rural than either Stir or Beminster, with all due respect, some of the outlying villages, there is the capacity for us to look at how we would deliver a sort of pop-up type model, a mobile model, if you like. And that's certainly a conversation we would be delighted to have with you. I have every sympathy with the transport networks in the rural localities. If we could wind the clock back to 1964, I'm sure we would say to Dr. Beeching, just hold that report about Sturminster railway line for a moment, will you please? We're going to need that in a few decades' time.
Thank you, Councillor. Teresa.
Thank you, Councillor Jones, and I can feel suitably challenged today. It's helpful. It is helpful, genuinely. I know that Amanda, who now has lead responsibility for the North, has it as one of her top priorities, and I think give us a few weeks. It's not okay for us that any lag is described as not working, so we'll get there.
Thank you. Colleagues, we are asked in this case to comment on the service delivery model and support the approach to implementation. And I think you're not looking for a proposer and seconder, are you, George? I think we have clearly commented and supported. And you will take on board the possibility of a visit to a family hub or hubs. Thank you. I think childcare, social children's services, we can release you by the look of it. Thank you very much for coming this morning and spending your time. Thank you. Good morning, Councillor Wharf. Our next item is to look at the Adult Social Care Market Sustainability Plan for 2023 and 25, and report by Mark Tyson.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the Adult Social Care Market Sustainability Plan for 23-25. Mark is going to give an update on the work. For many of you, you'll be familiar with this piece of work. It has been to overview on several occasions, and we're grateful for the input in bringing it to this point. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Mark to take us through.
Okay, thank you. So for the committee's benefit, I'm Mark Tyson. I'm doing some strategy support work with the commissioning team here in Dorset, including supporting my colleague, the head of Older People's Commissioning and Market Access, on the development of this plan. So as John just said, you have seen this plan in its substantial form previously. It subsequently went to Cabinet on the 4th of October as intended and was approved for submission to the Department of Health and Social Care in draft form as per the requirements, and then at Cabinet was delegated to the Executive Director to make the final submission after it had been back through this committee for a further conversation. The initial expectation was that we'd have a February submission date for the final plan following some specific feedback from the department on our plan. The committee will be aware there's been changes to how the social care reforms are being implemented, and one of those was to make a change to that. So we're not going to get specific feedback on our plan, we'll get general national feedback on themes coming out of all the plans. So at this stage, the actions that are in our plan that's before you here are the same actions that we presented previously to the committee. We've had various conversations along the way with partners and with providers about the plans, and there's been seen no reason to change those actions at this point. But the narrative has been adjusted to account for the fact that there has been changes to the national reform programme. So some of those elements that were coming in around charging reform that are now being delayed, and they do have an impact on how we'd work with the market around care and paying for care. So that narrative has been adjusted to kind of for a different outlook for the next 1 to 3 years. But what is probably helpful for the committee to note is in sections 2.5 to 2.11, whilst the plan hasn't changed, colleagues in the commissioning team have been sort of cracking on with implementing some of what is in there, and the report summarises some of the early successes that we're starting to see from this approach. So one of those is the market has very much welcomed our commitment to rerun the fair cost of care exercise in the next financial year to inform future uplifts in the years following. And that was seen as a very positive commitment to the dialogue around understanding the costs that providers face. The Provider Association has, there's an agreement now being just about to be, have the wet ink on it to support the Provider Association for both home care, well, for all forms of care provider in the market. And again, that's a really important step forward in the dialogue between the council and local care providers and care businesses. And they will very much help with kind of the shaping of the future plan as it kind of emerges and develops. A number of systems to improve information flows. There's reference to one called Care Cubed, which allows us to kind of understand our benchmarking better, and something called PAMS, which is Provider Assessment and Market Management Solutions, which allows information to be swapped between us and providers about their quality and performance. Will be an important part of the systems going forward, as well as some retendering and contract changes. And all of that together, as I say, is positive evidence of the plan being implemented. And I think there's some early numbers starting to come out of that as well, around kind of reduced numbers of care hours that can't be sourced and so on. So it is starting to have a real impact on how well care can be delivered for people who need it in Dorset. And so I think that's the summary of the report, Chairman. So.
Thank you, Mark. Does anyone wish to comment or ask questions? You're sitting in stunned silence. Beryl.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, this I was quite interested in the council signed up to this system called Care Cubed. I mean, could you define that a little bit more? I mean, is it just a fancy word that's come up that it just covers similar to what you've done before, or is it something completely different? And something that we would really like to know about. So could you actually expand on that? The other thing is, you mentioned in 2.6, a grant agreement, investment attached to reinvigorate the Provider Association. I've never heard of that before. The association currently recruiting board members. What's that all about as well, please? So I've got two parts to the question. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Okay, I'm Sarah Sewell. Hello, I'm Head of Service for Older People and Prevention Commissioning. So just to address the two queries, and if I miss anything, then colleagues will help out. In terms of Care Cubed, so it's an independent platform, piece of software that mainly our brokerage team will use, and they use that with providers, and that's about how we can understand those placement costs, particularly around the more complex packages of care. And that really helps us break down those individual package costs and compares it with kind of other areas, benchmark comparators, etc. So it helps us really break down those conversations with providers to really understand costs and helps us negotiate. Another area of the system also, which is very important for us, is that it allows us to really start to develop our brokerage service with training and developing that skill set, which is another area that we've got in our strategies as an area for development. In terms of the Provider Association, so this is an independent association that is led by care provider professionals. So it covers the whole market, and they're independent organisations who work in the sector, and they're looking at kind of best practice, kind of key issues, areas. And we've developed a work programme with the provider association so that we can work together on those key issues. So it's really about having an independent voice for those providers to work together, to work with us. And we have those areas that we've identified together as key priority areas to push forward, and we've referenced some of those in the plan.
Local Dorset thing, this provider association, or is it national?
It's local to Dorset. But just to add to that, so our lead representative on the Dorset Care Provider Association is very much linked in with regional and national programmes. So the lead there, Anna, she shares that information with us. They sort of highlight the good work that they're doing, particularly around trusted assessment, which is referenced in the report, which is really being seen as sort of a key kind of initiative that's really successful in Dorset that other areas are learning from.
Chair, if I could add as well. So I think it's probably important context. But both of those initiatives are really part of our strategy, working much more closely with the market. So although the report is about the market sustainability plan, which was very much something mandated in the reforms programme, Dorset had started work on this prior to the mandate. And we'd done that because we realised that we needed to ensure that the market moving forward had sufficiency. So the steps that we're taking, very much that market conversation through a provider organisation, but also that analytical information that we're able to glean through doing the exercise with providers, almost like open book accounting, and then comparative information through CareCube are also part of that strategy.
Thank you. Colleagues, if no one else wants to speak, can I ask you to look at the recommendation on page 135? Councillor Wharf, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for being late, and thank you. I think I made my timing just correct, but there you are. A bit of detail. CareCube is an extremely well-respected organisation and piece of work, and is used by many people. And funnily enough, the leader was asking me exactly the question that you've just asked a week or so ago. What I would like to say about the general situation, I'd like to thank Overview for the input that you've given us to enable us to get to this point. We've committed to take a first-year report on the actions taken this financial year to scrutiny, so that will go there. I suppose the other thing I would add, which I can add from a political point of view, which the officers are probably far too polite to say, we've been disappointed with government that haven't come back to us in terms of their response to our input, which they promised to do, which was really disappointing because the officers put a lot of effort into preparing this and were told that they needed to get a shift on because government were going to come back and were going to give us a response based on what we put in. And government have now not done that. They've given us some money for the dislocation caused. It's quite difficult, but I doubt it covers us completely. So I think they've done a good job, and I recommend the report to you and ask you to approve it, and look forward to it coming back to scrutiny as a result of the end of year. But as soon as we get something from government, we'll let you know. It's very difficult for you to add that to your long-term plan because we're beholden on government, and I can't think why, but government seems to have had a few other things on its mind. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, strange that, Councillor Wolfe. Colleagues, we are asked to... sorry, Councillor Knox, were you wishing to comment? No. We're asked to comment, which we've done. I think there are no amendments recommended, and we're commenting on the process, the positive impact initially, and the financial position. So no one, we have commented, we appear to be supportive. We are not required to make any formal recommendations. So thank you, team, for coming. Thank you, and you, Peter. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so our next item is the Day Opportunities Task and Finish Group, and we're being asked to approve the terms of reference and to answer or to clarify a point being made earlier. It is not the intention that this Task and Finish Group should be politically controlled, politically biased. This is balanced, rather. This is a group of people who wish to work together to give this a really good look and come up with some recommendations. And committee members are asked to indicate to the chairman, who isn't here today but will be here, to make their views known to the chairman if they do wish to become involved in that group, because we'd rather have willing horses than people who've been directed in by political masters. So first of all, can we look at the actual terms of reference? People have had a chance to read that. Does anyone wish to comment?
Thank you, Chair. If I can just make a couple of opening remarks. Again, I thank you very much for your input so far and what you're going to do. I think I know you well enough to allow myself to make some comments which are, I believe, guidance to you. You don't have to take it, but you would not thank me if I turned around later and said, why didn't you do this or whatever. There's two or three things. The first is any actions that are recommended will require probably significant consultation. So whilst you're going through this, you need to recognise that there will be a requirement to consult quite widely on this and possibly in more than one stage. The second thing is that the audience we've got, both in terms of day visitors and their carers and relatives, are very well informed and are very engaged in the process. And what I'm trying to say is that if you come up with any findings, you need to be careful that they're not misinterpreted, because that has happened in the past and we need to choose our words carefully. So I'm very keen that you do this work, but you recognise that there is a process to go through and that there is a long history of very, very good consultation that you need to be aware of. Not a problem, it's just an issue that I'm just saying you need to be aware of. The third thing is it's my view, and it's my view alone, that the April date that you've got in the report is much too ambitious. I think the amount of work that requires to be done will take you longer. It's entirely up to you, but I just have a sense that if you rush it, you might not do as much as we would like. So I would much rather you took a little bit longer, bearing in mind that there's a lot of stages to go through, and there's a requirement to make sure that any information is properly communicated. And the fourth thing, and I apologise if this sounds at all, I'm lecturing you in any sense, because I'm absolutely not. But any findings you make need to be on the basis of evidence across Dorset. And I'm very concerned that this is not just related to homes within the areas of those people who are on the committee. I know that won't be the case, and it's perfectly reasonable to use individual homes to give a general outcome as a result of, we found this, we need to go there. But it needs to absolutely concentrate on the solutions and the recommendations for the whole of Dorset. I hope you don't mind me saying that, and thank you very much, Chair.
Accept your comments on behalf of the chairman who isn't here today, Councillor Wharf, and I'm sure we will pass those comments on. In this Task and Finish group will be chaired by Councillor Mike Parks, who's the chairman of this committee, and it will be staffed, if that's the right word. The members will be either members of this committee or others expressing an interest who wish to become involved. Councillor Lugg.
I believe the date's already been discussed with the officers, so I'm content with that. If we need more time, then we ask for it later. One thing I'm particularly concerned about is local members, because as Councillor Ward pointed out, some of the wards are not represented where there may be day centres or other services. And it says they may wish to provide an opportunity. I think it's vital that we provide an opportunity for local members rather than may.
We can provide the opportunity which they may wish to take up. Yes, thank you. Otherwise, thank you.
I was only going to say this from what Councillor Wolf saying, it's certainly going to be a lot more work than just up to April 23. When I looked through it, I thought, wow, you know, they've got the date wrong. Should it be April 24? I mean, is there any time limit on it, can we ask, of this particular piece of work? If you want to have it comprehensive and we've got to go, you know, and talk to actual carers and people that are actually using the system and get evidence, then it's going to be a lot more time and effort and very sensitive work. So I think that is very important. And I would like to state at this point something totally different, that it is cross-party, that actually we do that. I mean, I've been told that I've got to approach Mike Park to actually get on the Tax and Finish group. I don't like that idea. I thought it was going to be discussed who was going to go on the committee today from the overview committee, rather than being left to me, you know, write Mike Park a note and say, will you consider me? So I think that's slightly not democratic. So I don't like that idea. I do think that it's almost favouritism rather than actually discussing it in an open meeting. Thank you.
Your comments, Councillor Ezard, but we aren't doing that piece of work today. Councillor Wolf, did you wish to comment? I would also say, Councillor Ezard, I strongly suspect you would be one of the first people that Councillor Parks would grab.
Thank you, Chair. So on the question of time, we are committed to delivering some efficiencies from the Tricuro transfer to Care Dorset, where these services sit in year. That's next financial year. So there is an imperative not to stray too far into the year, because otherwise we won't be able to deliver those efficiencies. So I think that, you know, April is tight. With the commitment of the team, we probably can achieve that. But if there was a little bit of latitude, perhaps May, June, I think that is probably doable. These are difficult times, and there's a lot of resource being deployed towards the hospital situation at the moment. So, you know, depending on how the rest of the winter goes, that could also be an impact as well.
Thank you. Councillor Knox.
Thanks. Can I make a comment, please? Is that all right, Councillor? Because I was just going to say that I think the chairman will always ensure that the membership of this panel is going to be made in a transparent and fair way. Absolutely. It is obvious that it needs to go probably wider than this committee. As you can see today, we haven't got everyone here, and it would have been wrong actually to appoint today. But I'm sure Councillor Parks will get the right information out to members of this committee, but also to other ward members, because they're not here. And I think we should also remind ourselves that we are not operational. This Task and Finish panel is about more of a policy direction. It is not actually trying to form how things are done on a daily basis. And I get the point about not straying. It's almost initiative, it's almost instinct, isn't it, that we bring as councillors. Yes, in the back of our minds are our own wards, but also in the back of our minds is the whole of Dorset, because that's what we're here for. And whether you're on this committee or not, there is some really good value input that we can get from fellow councillors. But I'd just like to say, if I thought that this was anything to do with favouritism, I would be certainly speaking my mind about that, just to reassure you.
Wisdom, Councillor Knox. Councillor Ezard, did you wish to come back?
Well, I need to say that if this is a really urgent thing to do, why haven't we already had something from the chairman about this round to members, because if you want to get on with it, then we're now going to have to wait until after this meeting for it to be relayed to the chairman to then come back to us. And I'm thinking that it's already some delay. So I'm sorry, but I do still think that, okay, perhaps I shouldn't have chosen the word favouritism, but it is all about contact with somebody rather than being in an open forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ezard. Your comments are noted. Did you wish to say anything, Councillor Wolf?
Two or three things. I'm not sure, because I've not discussed this with the officers. Whilst John is texting me saying, yeah, we need something by June at the latest, and I get that, it may be that during the review there are some things that you can package up and recommend in the interim, and you can leave some stuff later. I don't know, but that may be an option. So that's trying to give you some flexibility and wiggle room. The second thing is in terms of members. I mean, I think the chairman is going to have a really difficult job, because can I first of all say, absolutely agree, this must be cross-party. The chairman's going to have to get representation geographically across the county, going to have to get representation politically across, all sorts of things, and that's going to be hard. So give him a little bit of space to do that, because I think this is sufficiently important that that's worth taking a bit of time. But as Councillor Knox said, like 24 hours or so, it's not a lot of time. But I do think it's important that you get a decent cross-section. And it's up to the chairman, but I don't suppose he'll prevent other people from turning up to the Task and Finish group. So, people will have their opportunity. So I welcome the comments so far, absolutely about cross-party. And if it makes sense whilst you're discussing it, if it can be done, it may be that you want to split it into 2 rather than 1, if that makes sense. It may not, but it could, and it could allow you to review some things, make some general comments which we can take into the process and make more detailed comments later. But Councillor Knox is absolutely right. We need to recognise that this is policy and not operational, and we need to try and avoid straying into that area. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Wolf. That was very helpful. Any further comments that anyone wishes to make? Otherwise, do we accept, and I would expect that we need a proposer and seconder, do we not, George? Yes. Do I have a proposer to accept the terms of reference? Or does no one want to do it? No. Thank you, Rebecca. You're proposing and seconding? Jean, thank you. And are you all in agreement with the terms of reference? Yes? Thank you. That's all in favour. Thank you very much. And finally, our next item is the forward plan, which you have before you. Have we any comments, any of the officers or Peter or any of you wish to make on the forward plan? Sorry? Okay. I have a note. Yes. Since the publication of the forward plan, the requests have been received to consider the following items in upcoming meetings: Youth Justice Service Inspection, Youth Justice Plans, and Adult Social Care Plan 10-year plan. And an update on the virtual school was requested at this meeting, but will now be held as an all-member briefing. And the virtual school annual report 21-22 was received by the Corporate Parenting Board in November. So that is the additional information that you don't have on the plan before you. So are people content to accept the forward plans before you? In which case, we have no exempt business. I therefore close the meeting at 11:50. Thank you all for your attendance this morning, and safe journey home.